Ladies and gentlemen, I'm getting word that Anthony "Rumble" Johnson has just retired in the octagon after his fight with Daniel Cormier. You know, I got to be honest with you, we heard some rumblings about that. That's something we spoke about here at work before the show. Your reactions to that, guys?
Yeah, this was something that I was hearing. I was very surprised when I heard that. But my understanding is that, you know, Anthony, very happy guy. He's been fighting a very long time. He's done what he needed to do as far as he's concerned in his career. He had an amazing career, a true knockout prodigy. And, you know, at the end of the day, after this loss, it would be very difficult for him to get another shot at the belt. He's done some amazing things in this sport. Big congratulations to Anthony Johnson.
Yeah, I'm disappointed to see him go. I don't know if it would necessarily be a difficult thing for him to get another W inside the octagon, or another, I'm sorry, not a W, but another shot at the title, especially with Jon Jones coming back. I would love to see that fight, but I guess it's not happening right now.
Well, I tell you what, there are a lot of light heavyweights out there that went, yes!
Yeah. Don't have to deal with the power of Anthony "Rumble" Johnson.
I know.
Anymore,
Jimmy
yeah.
Manawa was sitting octagon side tonight. I know he's probably, he wanted a rematch, but probably happy about that. Folks, I should tell you, we will have footage for you. We just don't have it right now due to pay-per-view rules, but certainly stay with us on the program. We will have tons of footage for you and a lot to talk about. Anthony "Rumble" Johnson, not the only man to retire tonight in the octagon. But Ken Flo, let's just get to this tonight. You know, the main event did look very similar to the first time AJ and DC met up at UFC 187. So why don't you talk to us about what you saw tonight?
You know, I was a little concerned because DC was ducking into the power kick of Anthony Johnson. Something, again, we talked about. You do not want to do that. He was lucky to not get caught there. But once Daniel got him on the ground, it was all Daniel Cormier. Very dominant there. Anthony Johnson just looked like he had no clue of what to do. And I know that that's what Daniel really worked on, solidifying, being surgical with his approach. Once he gets the back, there was no getting out.
Yeah, we didn't see any scrambling or any attempt to create a scramble from Anthony Johnson. After the first fight, I think that's what he should have gone back to the gym and work on, because a guy like Daniel Cormier is going to be on top at some point during the fight.
You know, Ken Flo, I heard there was a guy that went up to AKA to help Daniel Cormier train. He's pretty good at jiu-jitsu. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, we worked on this position. I'm not saying this was because of me. Daniel put in the work, obviously. But this is a position we know we would be able to get to. And for Daniel, he was a little disappointed that he wasn't able to capitalize on a few of the submissions in round 2 in his last fight. This time, he was really able to capitalize. And there's a reason why he couldn't scramble out. He knew better. Yeah. It was just solid positioning there from Daniel Cormier. DC, you did your homework, buddy. Good job.
Nice,
good job.
Nice. You know, Yves, I want to talk to you about what Rumble was doing there. It did look to wrestle instead of throwing his hands. And, you know, we do hear sometimes fighters want to beat the other guy at their own game. But what do you think was going on there? Why didn't Rumble just let those hands go?
I have no idea why he didn't let those hands go, but what he should have done is use those transitions that he was having some success in the wrestling. It wasn't great success, but he got to the takedown a few times. That's when you disengage, because he's the guy that needs the space to land powerful shots. I was disappointed that he didn't disengage in those times.
Well, I guess Rumble is probably disappointed to go out like that, but if he kind of knew before this fight that maybe it would be his last one, it's probably not too hard for him to take, and I'm sure we will be hearing from him later on. But, Flo, you know, we're so familiar with Daniel Cormier that, you know, sometimes we forget how good he is. He's now defeated the scariest man in the UFC twice. You know, we talk a lot about this guy being a future Hall of Famer, but do you still think it's going to be until he meets Jon Jones that this man gets respect?
You know what? I think so. Unfortunately, he's got who many people believe is the greatest fighter to ever fight in the octagon, Jon Jones. But you can't take away from what Daniel Cormier has done in the UFC. Undefeated at heavyweight, you know, being over in Strikeforce, winning the tournament over there against some amazing competition when nobody knew who he was. Daniel Cormier is absolutely a Hall of Famer. Win or lose against his next fight against Jon Jones.
You know, I do hope that we can get a visual on Jon Jones. It was ice through the veins, his reaction to that fight. I mean, I know we're hoping to hear from him later on, but what a matchup that will be when they go at it for the second time. Yves, if you think that happens, what do you think DC would do better in the second time if he gets in there with Jon Jones?
Well, the one good thing, or the plus for DC going into that fight, is that Jon has been out of the octagon for almost 2 years now, and that's a long time to be away from the sport. The sport is constantly evolving. It's such a young sport, and the evolution of the sport is so quick. A guy like DC can close that gap on Jon Jones, and it went to a decision in the prior time. So it's an opportunity for DC to really step up and show himself.
And it's gotta be a completely different approach. I know that Daniel Cormier is so used to grinding his opponents down, and he went with that same mindset in that first fight against Jon Jones. it did not work. He realizes he needs to be better. He needs to show more movement. He needs to show more feints. He needs to be way trickier and way more confusing if he wants to get the win over someone like Jon Jones.
Yeah, of course, they were supposed to meet at UFC 200. Jon Jones has been out for a year, and I believe his suspension will be up this summer, and so maybe we'll be able to see them meet this time. And, you know, in that first fight, DC admits to taking his foot off the gas in the fourth round.
Yeah, you can't take any rounds off against
No.
someone like Jon Jones. And I think that was his first big 5-round fight. He took the 4th round off, something you can't do against anybody, let alone Jon Jones. He learned his lesson, came back in shape. Again, he's been preparing for a lot of 5-round fights, and Jon Jones hasn't.
Yeah, and with that preparation and all the time that he's been in the octagon since Jon has been out, I think that's a big advantage for him. He's going to have to do exactly what you said as far as throwing the feints and changing the game up. He can't fight the same fight against Jon Jones, though, but he's been in there and had some chances to experiment on different things in his game, and he needs to bring that to the forefront.
Do you think there was any sense of DC? You know, people are calling it Towelgate with everything that happened yesterday with the weigh-ins. Do you think that he maybe went out there with a little extra something to prove tonight?
I think maybe. You know, I think that Daniel Cormier, first of all, doesn't get a lot of credit from the fans. And the fans, for whatever reason, look for different reasons to hate on Daniel Cormier. I don't understand it. I don't think he gets enough respect. This is a guy who is one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the UFC today. And yeah, unfortunately, I think it might take a win over a guy like Jon Jones before he does get the respect. But whether that happens or not, I think a couple years down the line after he retires, people will come to respect what DC has done.
Yeah, what DC has done inside the octagon, inside the cage of Strikeforce, DC was undefeated besides Jon Jones. And the guys that he's beaten, I mean, look at all the heavyweights that he's taken out. Every single light heavyweight other than Jon Jones that he's fought, he's beaten. And those types of guys are the guys that will get you into the Hall of Fame. DC is a Hall of Fame caliber fighter, and he does deserve the respect, at least the respect of the fans, even if he doesn't get their love.
And the wars that he's been through.
Right.
I mean, that fight against Alexander Gustafsson was an absolute classic, and people forget what Gustafsson did to Jon Jones. He was this close, and still people believe that Gustafsson may have beaten Jon Jones, whereas Cormier made it look a little bit easier, but an amazing fight.
Absolutely. Now, I want to come back with you on the flip side of this, Even. I'll start with you. Let's talk about Anthony Rumble Johnson. You know, he has said that he is retiring. He has put down the gloves tonight. You know, what kind of legacy does he leave behind? He's a man, too, who also fought in multiple weight classes and obviously put the hurt on a bunch of guys. He's a knockout specialist. He's a guy that is going to definitely leave an imprint on the game as well.
Yeah, definitely. He was a mediocre welterweight. He was good, but he was not at the top of the heap at the welterweight division. He slowly moved up, fought at heavyweight a couple of times also. But when he came back to the UFC in the light heavyweight division, he really showed us who he is. He showed us the power, and he showed us exactly how all the potential that he had, we saw it come to bear. And I think he leaves behind a very good legacy. Unfortunately, he didn't get a chance to hold on to the belt, but I'm still proud of what he's done inside the octagon.
Yeah, wasn't as successful welterweight because he was like a 230-pound welterweight. I mean, it's difficult to make 170 pounds. But when you look at what he's done, although he didn't have the belt like a Ken Norton, I would kind of compare him to someone like a Ken Norton, a guy who just had devastating power. If he connected, you were in trouble. You were done. You were not going to get a second chance. Anthony Johnson was one of the most explosive fighters that I've ever seen. Gentlemen,
I have to ask you, because at this point you are both obviously retired, when do you know? When do you know it's time? Is it about performances actually in the octagon? Is it about the hours in the gym? When do you know?
I think it's about performance when you're not putting out your best work, despite the same amount of work that you were putting in the past. You know, I think that's one of the keys. I think the other key is if you don't have the passion, if you don't have that love for putting on the gloves and going to the gym and grinding every single day, it's time. It's over. And if your body isn't responding as well, I think you realize, hey, you know what? I'm not performing. I'm not putting out my best art out there. It's time to stop.
I think it's different for everyone. We look at Patrick Cote, and he's had a full career, and he decided that tonight was going to be his last fight before going in. I don't know about Anthony Rumble Johnson, if that was the decision he had before the fight, but I would love to hear his reasons because I still see so much potential in Anthony Johnson. I see a lot of great fights ahead for him, and it's not. I'm one that's not happy.
Yeah, but it's not about that. It's not about that. There's a lot of fighters that can go out and continue to fight, but if that fighter doesn't feel like he wants to do it anymore, then you know what? He's going to put himself at risk. So I agree. If a fighter doesn't want to fight, hey, power to him.